The scorching Arizona sun hung mercilessly in the cloudless sky, turning the asphalt of the Desert Ridge Mall parking lot into what felt like a giant griddle. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in late July, the kind of day where the heat shimmered invisible waves off car hoods and made the distant mountains look like mirages. Officer Jake wiped the sweat from his brow as he stepped out of his air-conditioned patrol car, the wall of heat hitting him like a physical force. Beside him, his K9 partner Rex, a magnificent German shepherd with alert amber eyes and a thick black and tan coat, emerged with practiced grace, his tongue already lolling as he panted in the oppressive temperature. Jake and Rex had been partners for 3 years now, responding to everything from routine traffic stops to dangerous suspect apprehensions. At 85 pounds of pure muscle and trained instinct, Rex was both Jake's best friend and his most reliable backup. They were conducting their routine patrol of the mall's expansive parking lot, checking for any suspicious activity or vehicles, when Jake noticed the usual midday scene. Harried parents hauling shopping bags, teenagers clustered around the food court entrance, and elderly couples moving slowly toward the shade of covered walkways. Rex's ears suddenly perked up, swiveling toward the eastern section of the lot. Jake had learned to trust his partner's instincts implicitly. The dog could detect things human senses missed entirely. "What is it, boy?" Jake murmured, his hand instinctively moving to his radio. Rex's body language had shifted from relaxed patrol mode to alert attention, his nose working the air, testing for scents that didn't belong. Then Jake heard it too, a sound that made his blood run cold despite the sweltering heat. A woman's scream, high-pitched and desperate, cutting through the ambient noise of car engines and distant conversations. It wasn't the startled yelp of someone dropping their shopping bags or the frustrated cry of a parent dealing with a tantruming child. This was raw, primal panic, the sound of someone whose world was collapsing in real time. "Let's go, Rex," Jake commanded, breaking into a run toward the source of the screaming. Rex surged forward beside him, his powerful legs eating up the distance across the scorching pavement. Other shoppers had stopped and were turning toward the commotion, but none of them were moving to help. They stood frozen, uncertain, watching the drama unfold from a safe distance. As Jake rounded a row of parked SUVs and minivans, he spotted her. A young woman, probably in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, standing beside a silver SUV. Her hands were pressed against the tinted rear window, her face contorted in absolute terror. She was pounding on the glass with both fists, her screams now mixed with sobs that made her words almost unintelligible. "My daughter, oh God, my daughter. She's locked inside, please somebody help." The woman's voice cracked with each word, raw with the kind of fear that only a parent facing their worst nightmare could experience. Her shopping bags lay scattered on the ground beside her, their contents, children's clothes, groceries, mundane items from an ordinary shopping trip, spilled across the pavement, forgotten in the face of catastrophe. Jake's training kicked in immediately, his body moving on autopilot even as his mind processed the situation. He sprinted toward the vehicle, Rex keeping perfect pace beside him, both of them closing the distance in seconds. "Ma'am, I'm Officer. Step back from the vehicle," he commanded, his voice firm but not unkind, trying to cut through her panic with the authority of someone who could help. Through the tinted rear window, Jake could just make out a small figure slumped in a car seat, a child motionless, her head lolled to one side. The sight sent a jolt of adrenaline through his system. Every cop in Arizona knew the statistics, had seen the horrific training videos, understood the deadly mathematics of children and hot cars. The temperature outside was 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside that sealed vehicle, it could already be 130 degrees or higher. A child's body temperature rises 3 to 5 times faster than an adult's. 10 minutes in those conditions could cause heat stroke. 15 minutes could mean brain damage. 20 minutes could mean death. "How long has she been in there?" Jake demanded, already pulling his radio to his mouth to call for emergency services. His eyes never left the child in the car seat, searching desperately for any sign of movement, any indication she was still breathing. I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. I just ran inside the mall for 1 second, literally 1 second, to grab something I forgot, and when I came back out, I realized my keys were in my purse and my purse is locked in the car with her. The mother's words tumbled out in a panicked rush, her hands shaking violently as she gestured at the vehicle. I called 911, but they said it would be 10 minutes before anyone could get here, and I don't know what to do, and she's not moving, and oh God, please, please help her. Jake's jaw tightened. 10 minutes was an eternity. The child had already been in that car for 10 minutes, which meant she'd been slowly cooking in what was essentially an oven. Another 10 minutes waiting for fire rescue to arrive with their specialized equipment to safely unlock the vehicle. That could be too late. That could be the difference between life and death. Rex barked sharply beside him, a sound Jake recognized. His partner was alerting to the danger, sensing the urgency of the situation. The dog's ears were flat against his head, his body tense, ready to act on whatever command Jake would give. Around them, a crowd had begun to gather, shoppers drawn by the commotion, faces pale with concern, hands covering mouths in horror as they realized what was happening. Someone was filming with their phone. Others were calling out suggestions, offering help, but nobody knew what to do. Jake made his decision in a split second. He'd been trained for this. He'd prepared for this. But no amount of training could fully prepare you for the weight of a child's life in your hands. "Ma'am, shield your eyes and step back," Jake ordered, already reaching for his tactical baton. "I'm breaking the window." The mother nodded frantically, backing away but keeping her horrified gaze fixed on her daughter. Jake positioned himself at the rear passenger window, Rex automatically moving to his side, both of them working as the seamless team they'd trained to be. Jake raised his baton, aimed for the corner of the window where the glass would shatter most effectively, and brought it down with all the force he could muster. The safety glass exploded with a sharp crack that echoed across the parking lot, cascading into thousands of tiny crystalline pieces that scattered across the pavement like diamonds. The crowd gasped collectively. Jake didn't hesitate. He reached through the shattered window, his arm getting scratched by remaining glass shards, and fumbled for the door lock. His fingers found the switch and pressed it. The locks clicked open with a sound that felt like salvation. Jake yanked the door open, and a wave of suffocating heat rolled out, so intense it felt like opening an oven door. The temperature inside had to be well over 120 degrees. He leaned in, his hands moving quickly but carefully to unbuckle the complex straps of the car seat. The little girl, she couldn't be more than 5 years old, with curls plastered to her sweaty forehead and wearing a pink princess dress, was completely limp, her skin flushed an alarming red, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Got her?" Jake called out, lifting the child from the car seat with practiced care, supporting her head and neck. She was burning hot to the touch, her small body radiating heat like a fever. As he pulled her out into the relatively cooler air of the parking lot, Rex pressed close, whimpering softly, a sound Jake had never heard his tough-as-nails K9 partner make before. The crowd was silent now, holding their collective breath as Jake laid the unconscious little girl on the pavement in the shade of his patrol car. Her name tag, attached to her dress, read Emma in glittery letters. Emma's lips were turning blue despite the heat, a terrifying sign that her body was shutting down. Her mother collapsed beside them, her hands hovering over her daughter but afraid to touch her, afraid that even that contact might somehow make things worse. "Emma, baby, wake up, please wake up," the mother sobbed, her voice breaking. Jake's fingers found Emma's neck, pressing gently to check for a pulse. It was there, weak, thready, way too fast, but it was there. She was alive, for now. But they were far from out of danger. Jake's training took over completely, his mind shifting into emergency response mode as he knelt beside Emma's small, overheated body on the scorching pavement. Every second mattered now, Each tick of the clock could mean the difference between full recovery and permanent brain damage, between life and death. His hands moved with practiced precision, years of emergency medical training guiding his actions even as his heart pounded against his ribs. "Rex, sit. Stay alert," Jake commanded, his voice steady despite the urgency coursing through his veins. Rex immediately dropped into a sitting position beside Emma, his intelligent eyes never leaving the little girl's face. The German Shepherd's presence was both protective and calming, creating a small barrier between the medical emergency and the growing crowd of onlookers who pressed closer, their phones out, some filming, others calling for help. Jake pressed his radio button, speaking rapidly but clearly. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I have a Code 3 medical emergency at Desert Ridge Mall, North Parking Lot, Section E. 5-year-old female, heat exhaustion, possibly heat stroke. Child was locked in vehicle approximately 10 minutes. Patient is unconscious, breathing shallow, pulse weak and rapid. I need EMS here now, priority 1. The dispatcher's voice crackled back immediately. "Copy that, Unit 47. EMS is en route, ETA 7 minutes. Fire rescue is also responding." 7 minutes. Jake's jaw clenched. That was too long, way too long. He looked down at Emma. Her cherubic face was bright red, her curls soaked with sweat, her small chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths that weren't getting enough oxygen into her system. Her lips had progressed from pink to an alarming shade of blue-purple. Her eyes were closed, the lids fluttering occasionally but not opening. She was alive, but she was slipping away right in front of him. "Ma'am, what's your name?" Jake asked the distraught mother, trying to get her focused, trying to cut through her panic with direct questions. Sarah Mitchell. Is my baby going to?" Sarah couldn't even finish the sentence, her voice dissolving into sobs. Her hands trembled violently as she reached toward Emma but pulled back, terrified of doing something wrong. "Sarah, listen to me, look at me." Jake's voice was firm, authoritative, demanding her attention. Sarah's tear-filled eyes met his. "Emma is alive, she's breathing, but her body temperature is dangerously high and we need to cool her down immediately. I need you to help me. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded frantically, wiping her eyes with shaking hands. Yes, anything. What do I do?" "I need cool water, not ice cold, just cool, and towels or cloth. Can anyone help?" Jake called out to the crowd. Immediately, several people sprang into action. An elderly man rushed toward the mall entrance, moving faster than he probably had in years. A teenage girl pulled a water bottle from her backpack and thrust it toward Jake. A woman ran to her car and returned with a gym bag full of hand towels. While waiting for supplies, Jake carefully positioned Emma on her side in the recovery position, ensuring her airway stayed clear. He loosened the collar of her princess dress, giving her body room to breathe. Rex leaned in closer, his cold nose gently touching Emma's hand. The contact made the little girl's fingers twitch, a small but encouraging sign that she wasn't completely unresponsive. Jake checked Emma's pulse again. Still weak, still too fast. Her heart was racing at over 150 beats per minute, trying desperately to cool her overheated body. Her skin felt like it was radiating heat, burning to the touch. The medical facts ran through Jake's mind like a grim countdown. Heat exhaustion can become heat stroke within minutes. A child's organs can begin shutting down when their core temperature exceeds 104 degrees. Brain damage can occur at 105 degrees. Death becomes likely at 107 degrees. The elderly man returned with bottles of cool water from the mall's food court, followed by a restaurant manager carrying bags of ice wrapped in cloth napkins. Jake immediately went to work, wetting the towels with cool water and placing them on Emma's forehead, neck, and wrists, all the places where major blood vessels ran close to the surface. He avoided ice directly on her skin, knowing that cooling her too quickly could send her body into shock, causing her blood vessels to constrict and actually trap the heat inside. "Sarah, talk to her," Jake instructed. "Even if she can't respond, she might be able to hear you. Let her know you're here." Sarah moved closer, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Emma, sweetie, Mommy's here. You're going to be okay, baby. The nice policeman and his dog are helping you. You're safe now. Just hold on, sweetheart. Please hold on." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, dropping onto the pavement beside her daughter. Jake continued the cooling process methodically, replacing the warming towels with fresh, cool ones every 30 seconds, monitoring Emma's breathing, checking her pulse repeatedly. The crowd around them had grown to at least 40 people now, all watching in tense silence. Some were praying audibly. Others held hands with strangers, united in their desperate hope for this little girl they'd never met before today. Rex suddenly shifted position, moving closer to Emma's face. The German Shepherd did something Jake had never seen him do in 3 years of partnership. He lowered his head and gently licked Emma's hand, then her arm, his tongue cool against her burning skin. It was as if Rex understood exactly what needed to happen, as if some ancient instinct to protect was overriding his police training. The dog's actions were tender, careful, completely at odds with his usual role as a fearsome enforcement tool. "Good boy, Rex," Jake murmured, his throat tight with emotion he didn't have time to process. He glanced at his watch. 5 minutes since he'd called for EMS. 2 more minutes until they arrived if they were on schedule. Every second felt like an hour. Then Emma coughed, a small, wet sound that made everyone in the crowd inhale sharply. Her eyelids fluttered more dramatically now. Jake leaned in closer, his hand on her shoulder. "Emma, Emma, can you hear me? You're safe now. Can you open your eyes for me?" Another cough, stronger this time. Emma's head turned slightly toward the sound of Jake's voice. Her lips moved, trying to form words, but no sound came out. Her throat was too dry, her body too depleted. Sarah clutched Jake's arm, her knuckles white. "Is she waking up? Oh God, is she going to be okay?" "Come on, Emma," Jake encouraged softly. "That's it. You're doing great. Just open your eyes for me, sweetheart." Emma's eyelids fluttered again, and then, slowly, painfully slowly, they opened. Her eyes were unfocused at first, confused, glazed with the remnants of unconsciousness. She blinked several times, trying to make sense of where she was, why she was lying on hard ground instead of in her car seat, why everything felt wrong and scary and confusing. Then her gaze focused on something directly in front of her face. Not Jake, not her mother, Rex. The massive German Shepherd sat inches away, his intense amber eyes locked on hers, his expression somehow both fierce and gentle. Most children Emma's age would have screamed at finding a police dog's face so close to theirs upon waking. Most would have recoiled in fear from those sharp teeth, that powerful jaw, those predatory eyes. But Emma, still disoriented and weak, did something no one expected. Her small, pale hand slowly lifted from the pavement, moving as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, and reached toward Rex's face. Her tiny fingers, still trembling, touched the German Shepherd's nose. The dog remained perfectly still, allowing the contact, his tail giving a single, gentle wag. "Doggy," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible, hoarse and cracking. "Doggy saved me." The words were simple, childlike, but they hit Jake like a physical blow. Saved her. She somehow understood, even in her confused, traumatized state, that this dog and the man with him had pulled her from the edge of something terrible, that they had fought for her life when her body was giving up. Rex, as if understanding the profound significance of Emma's words, leaned forward and gently licked her fingers. His tongue was cool against her burning skin, and Emma's lips curved into the tiniest smile, a smile that made Sarah break down completely, sobbing with relief so intense it shook her entire body. In the distance, Jake heard the most beautiful sound in the world, sirens. The ambulance was close now, maybe a minute away. Emma was conscious, responsive, aware. Her pulse, while still too fast, had stabilized slightly. Her breathing was deeper now, more regular. The cooling treatment was working. She was going to make it. But Jake knew they weren't out of danger yet. Heat stroke could cause delayed complications. kidney failure, brain swelling, cardiac issues. Emma needed proper medical care immediately, needed a hospital, needed IV fluids and continuous monitoring. The next few hours would be critical. The ambulance screamed into the parking lot, lights flashing, followed closely by a fire truck. Paramedics jumped out, rushing toward them with bags of medical equipment. Jake began rapidly briefing them, timeline of events, treatment provided, patient's current condition, while Rex moved aside to let the professionals work. Sarah rode in the ambulance with Emma, but not before turning back to Jake one more time. "Thank you," she managed to say through her tears. "Thank you for saving her." Jake nodded, unable to trust his voice. He watched the ambulance pull away, sirens blaring as it rushed Emma toward the hospital and the continued fight for her full recovery. Beside him, Rex sat at attention, still watching the departing vehicle, as if he too understood that a little girl's life hung in the balance. The crowd slowly dispersed, people returning to their interrupted lives, their ordinary days. But Jake remained in that parking lot for several long minutes, his hand resting on Rex's head, both of them processing what had just happened. They had saved her, maybe, hopefully, if the next few hours went well. But Jake wouldn't rest easy until he knew for certain that Emma was going to be okay. Jake sat in his patrol car in the mall parking lot for nearly 20 minutes after the ambulance departed, his hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline crash. Rex lay in the back seat, uncharacteristically quiet, his head resting on his paws but his eyes alert and watchful. The parking lot had returned to its normal rhythm, cars coming and going, shoppers oblivious to the life-and-death drama that had just unfolded on this very spot. But Jake couldn't shake the image of Emma's pale face, her blue lips, her small hand reaching for Rex. "We did good, partner," Jake said softly, glancing at Rex in the mirror. The German shepherd's ears perked up at his handler's voice, and his tail thumped once against the seat. But Jake could see something different in his dog's eyes, a concern, an awareness that seemed almost human. In 3 years of partnership, through dangerous arrests and tense situations, Jake had never seen Rex behave the way he had with Emma. The gentle licks, the protective hovering, the visible distress when she wasn't responding. It was as if Rex had understood that this tiny human needed saving in a way that transcended his training. Jake's radio crackled. "Unit 47, what's your status?" He lifted the receiver. "Unit 47 clear, resuming patrol." But even as he said the words, Jake knew he wouldn't be able to focus on routine duties. He needed to know if Emma was going to be okay. He needed to know that his quick actions had been enough, that he hadn't been too slow, that she wouldn't suffer permanent damage from those terrible minutes locked in that overheated car. Instead of resuming patrol, Jake made a decision. He drove to Phoenix Children's Hospital where the ambulance had taken Emma. It wasn't standard procedure. His job was done. The report could be filed later. But something pulled him there with an intensity he couldn't explain. Rex seemed to sense where they were going, sitting up in the back seat as they pulled into the hospital's parking structure, his nose pressed against the window. The emergency room was the organized chaos Jake had witnessed countless times in his career. Nurses moving swiftly between rooms, doctors barking orders, the constant beeping of monitors, the antiseptic smell that couldn't quite mask underlying odors of illness and fear. Jake approached the reception desk, his uniform immediately commanding attention from the harried-looking nurse behind the counter. "Officer, Phoenix PD," he introduced himself. "I brought in a 5-year-old heat stroke victim about 40 minutes ago, Emma Mitchell. I was hopping to get an update on her condition." The nurse's expression softened with recognition. "You're the officer who saved her. From the parking lot." Word had apparently already spread through the hospital. "Let me page the attending physician. Doctor will want to speak with you." While Jake waited, he spotted Sarah Mitchell through the glass window of a consultation room. She was packing frantically, her phone pressed to her ear, tears still streaming down her face. Jake could read her body language. She was terrified, guilt-ridden, probably calling family members with updates. He remembered that desperate fear in her voice when she'd been screaming in the parking lot. No parent should ever have to experience that kind of terror. "Officer," a tall woman in a white coat approached, her dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, her eyes kind but serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Doctor. I understand you're the first responder who rescued Emma Mitchell." "Yes, ma'am. How is she?" Jake's voice was steady, but his heart was racing. He delivered countless incident reports, had in court dozens of times, but somehow this felt more personal, more important than any of that. Doctor gestured for Jake to step aside from the busy reception area, leading him to a quieter corner near the vending machines. Her expression was measured, professional, but Jake caught something in her eyes that made his stomach clench: concern. "Emma's condition was critical when she arrived," Doctor began, her voice low and confidential. "Her core body temperature was 106.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's well into dangerous heat stroke territory. We've been administering IV fluids, using cooling blankets, and monitoring her organ function very closely. The good news is that she's responding to treatment. Her temperature has come down to 102.4 degrees, and she's remained conscious and somewhat responsive since arrival." Jake felt some tension release from his shoulders. "That's good, right? She's going to be okay." Doctor hesitated, and that pause made Jake's heart sink. "Officer, Emma is stable for now, but we're not out of the woods yet. Heat stroke can cause delayed complications, kidney damage, liver problems, neurological issues. We won't know the full extent of any potential damage for at least 24 to 48 hours. The next 2 days are critical. We're running comprehensive tests, monitoring her brain function, checking her kidney and liver enzymes." She paused, her expression softening. "But I want you to know, if you hadn't acted as quickly as you did, if you'd waited for fire rescue to arrive, Emma would almost certainly have suffered severe brain damage or death. Your quick thinking and immediate medical intervention saved that little girl's life. You should know that." The words should have brought relief, but Jake only felt the weight of what if. What if he'd hesitated? What if he'd waited for backup? What if Emma didn't fully recover despite everything they'd done? He'd been a cop for 8 years, had faced down armed suspects, had pulled people from car accidents, had administered CPR more times than he could count. But somehow, this 5-year-old girl in a pink princess dress had gotten under his skin in a way nothing else ever had. "Can I see her?" Jake asked quietly. "Just for a moment, I just need to know." He couldn't finish the sentence. What did he need to know? That she was really alive, that she was breathing on her own, that she remembered the doggy who'd stayed by her side. Doctor considered this for a moment. "She's in the pediatric ICU. Normally, we restrict visitors to immediate family, but given the circumstances." She glanced at her tablet. "Mrs. Mitchell is with her now. Let me check if she's comfortable with a brief visit." A few minutes later, Jake found himself being led through the pediatric ICU, a floor painted in cheerful colors with cartoon characters on the walls, a stark contrast to the serious medical equipment visible in each room. Doctor stopped outside room 304 and knocked gently before opening the door. The room was dimly lit, with machines surrounding a small hospital bed. Emma looked even tinier than she had in the parking lot, dwarfed by the medical equipment, her small body covered in wires and tubes. An IV line ran into her arm. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking her heart rate, oxygen levels, temperature. But her eyes were open, and she was talking quietly with her mother. Sarah looked up when Jake entered, and her face immediately crumpled with fresh emotion. She stood quickly, crossing the room to grab both of Jake's hands. "Officer, I can't. I don't know how to," her voice broke. "The doctor said if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't acted so fast." She couldn't continue, sobs overtaking her words. "I'm just glad I was there," Jake said honestly, his throat tight. "How is she doing?" "She's awake, she's talking. The doctors say that's a very good sign." Sarah wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "She keeps asking about the police dog. She wants to know if the nice doggy is okay if he got too hot too. A watery laugh escaped Sarah. My daughter nearly died and she's worried about your dog. Jake felt something crack in his chest, a mixture of relief, admiration, and something he couldn't quite name. He approached the bed slowly, not wanting to startle Emma. Hey there, Emma. Do you remember me? Emma's head turned toward him, her blue eyes more focused now than they'd been in the parking lot. Her cheeks were still flushed, but her lips were pink again, no longer that terrifying blue-purple. An oxygen cannula sat under her nose and her curls were tangled and damp with sweat, but she was alert and aware. You're the policeman, she said, her voice hoarse and weak. You broke the window. That's right, I had to get you out of that hot car. You were very sick. Jake knelt beside the bed so he was at her eye level. How are you feeling now? Tired and my head hurts. Emma's small hand plucked at the hospital blanket, then her eyes widened with sudden concern. Where's the doggy? Is he okay? He was so hot outside. Did he get water? Despite everything, the fear, the stress, the weight of potential complications, Jake found himself smiling. This brave little girl, lying in a hospital bed with tubes and wires attached to her, was worried about Rex. The doggy is just fine. His name is Rex, and he's in my car right now with the air conditioning on and plenty of water. He wanted to come see you, but dogs aren't allowed in hospitals. Emma's face fell with disappointment. Oh, I wanted to say thank you. He was so nice to me. You can tell me and I'll tell him, Jake offered. What do you want to say to Rex? Emma thought for a moment, her young face serious with concentration. Then she said, with the simple, profound honesty that only children possess, tell him I love him, and tell him thank you for saving me. And tell him, she paused, her eyes growing heavy with exhaustion, tell him he's the best doggy in the whole world. Jake had to look away for a moment, blinking rapidly. 8 years as a cop and he'd never cried on duty. But something about this moment, this tiny, brave girl expressing such pure gratitude, threatened to undo him completely. I'll tell him, Jake promised, his voice rough. And Emma, you're very brave. Rex and I are both proud of you. As Jake left the hospital room a few minutes later, Doctor met him in the hallway. She's doing remarkably well, officer. If she continues like this through the night, I'm cautiously optimistic about her full recovery. You gave her that chance. Jake nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He walked back to his patrol car, where Rex was waiting patiently in the back seat. The German Shepherd's tail began wagging immediately when he saw his handler, and Jake opened the back door to scratch behind Rex's ears. Emma says she loves you, buddy, says you're the best dog in the world. Jake's voice was soft. And you know what? She's absolutely right. Rex licked Jake's hand, and for a moment, man and dog sat together in comfortable silence, both of them processing the extraordinary day they'd just lived through. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was only the beginning of a story that would change all their lives forever. 3 days had passed since the parking lot incident, and Jake found himself doing something he'd never done in his 8 years on the force, obsessively checking his phone during shift for updates on a victim. He'd called the hospital twice already that morning, each time receiving cautiously optimistic reports from the nursing staff. Emma Mitchell was stable. Her organ function tests were improving. Her body temperature had normalized. But the words cautiously optimistic weren't enough for Jake. He needed to know she was completely out of danger. Rex sensed his handler's distraction. As they sat in their patrol car outside a convenience store during their morning break, the German Shepherd pushed his nose through the partitions separating the front and back seats, nudging Jake's shoulder with unusual insistence. Jake turned to look at his partner, and those intelligent amber eyes seemed to ask the question neither of them could answer. Is the little girl okay? I know, boy. I'm worried too, Jake admitted, reaching back to scratch Rex's ears. The dog had been different since that day, more restless, more alert, as if waiting for something. Several times over the past 3 days, Rex had whined while they passed the mall, his head swiveling toward the parking lot where they'd found Emma. It was like he was looking for her, wondering where the small human in the pink dress had gone. Jake's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed Phoenix Children's Hospital. His heart immediately kicked into overdrive as he answered. "Officer. Officer, this is Sarah Mitchell, Emma's mother." Her voice came through the line, but Jake couldn't immediately read her tone. Was it good news or bad? His grip tightened on the phone. "The hospital gave me your number. I hope it's okay that I'm calling." "Of course. How's Emma?" Jake's question came out more urgently than he'd intended. There was a pause, and then Sarah's voice came back thick with emotion. But this time Jake could hear it was joy, not sorrow. "She's going to be fine, completely fine. Doctor just gave us the news. All of Emma's tests came back normal. No organ damage, no neurological issues, nothing. They're releasing her this afternoon." Sarah's voice broke on a sob. "Officer, my baby is coming home. She's really going to be okay." Jake closed his eyes, letting the relief wash over him like a wave. The tension he'd been carrying for 3 days, tension he hadn't even fully acknowledged, suddenly released from his shoulders, his chest, his very bones. "That's wonderful news, Mrs. Mitchell. That's the best news." "It's because of you," Sarah continued. "Doctor said if you'd hesitated even 2 more minutes, the outcome could have been completely different. You gave my daughter her life back. How do I ever thank someone for that?" Jake didn't know how to respond to gratitude of that magnitude. He'd saved lives before, it was part of the job, but something about Emma had affected him differently. Maybe it was her age, maybe it was the innocence in her eyes, maybe it was the way she'd worried about Rex even while fighting for her own life. "Just take care of her," he finally said. "That's thanks enough." "Actually," Sarah said, her tone shifting to something more hopeful, "Emma has been asking about Rex constantly. Every few hours she wants to know if the police dog is okay, if he's eating enough, if he's staying cool. The nurses are starting to know your K9 partner's name better than some of the doctors." Sarah laughed softly. "I know this is probably unusual, but Emma really wants to see Rex again, to thank him properly. Would that be possible? Maybe once she's home and settled." Jake glanced back at Rex, who was watching him intently, as if the dog could understand every word of the conversation. An idea began forming in Jake's mind, something that went against standard procedure but felt absolutely right. "Mrs. Mitchell, what if Rex and I came by the hospital this afternoon, before Emma is discharged? It might be good for her to see that Rex is healthy and happy. Sometimes closure is important, especially for kids who've been through trauma." The sound Sarah made was something between a laugh and a cry. "Are you serious? Oh my God, Emma is going to lose her mind with happiness. Yes, please, if it's allowed. Yes, absolutely yes." Jake made the arrangements, clearing it with his sergeant, and then with the hospital's administration. To his surprise, Doctor was enthusiastic about the idea. Positive emotional experiences can be incredibly healing for children who experience trauma, she explained over the phone. And Emma has been somewhat withdrawn since the incident. Seeing the dog who was there during her rescue might help her process what happened in a positive way. That afternoon, Jake found himself walking through the hospital's main entrance with Rex on a short leash beside him. They'd both been specially cleared for this visit. Jake in his crisp uniform, Rex freshly groomed and wearing his official K9 vest. Hospital staff stopped to stare as they passed, and several nurses smiled broadly, clearly having heard about Emma's story. "That's the officer," Jake heard one nurse whisper to another. "The one who saved that little girl from the hot car. And that's the dog. He's beautiful. I heard the girl has been asking for him nonstop." As they approached Emma's room on the pediatric floor, Jake felt an unexpected flutter of nervousness. Rex seemed to feel it too. The dog's ears were alert, his pace quickening slightly, his nose working the air. Could he smell Emma? Could he remember her scent from 3 days ago? Jake knocked gently on the door of room 304, and Sarah's voice called out, "Come in." The moment Jake opened the door, everything seemed to happen at once. Emma was sitting up in bed, no longer connected to IV lines or monitors, dressed in regular pajamas instead of a hospital gown. Her curls had been brushed and pulled back with a pink bow. Her color was good, rosy cheeks, bright eyes, no sign of the deathly pallor she'd had in the parking lot. But it was her reaction that stopped Jake in his tracks. The second Emma saw Rex, her entire face transformed. Her blue eyes went wide, her mouth opened in a perfect O of surprise and delight, and she let out a squeal of pure joy that probably violated every hospital quiet policy in existence. "Rex," she shrieked, bouncing on the bed despite her mother's gentle attempts to calm her. "Mommy, it's Rex, it's the doggy, he came to see me." Rex's reaction was equally extraordinary. The trained police dog, who was supposed to maintain professional discipline at all times, who had been taught to respond only to his handler's commands, pulled against his leash with surprising force. His tail was wagging so hard his entire back end was swaying, and he was making excited whining sounds Jake had never heard from him before. It was as if Rex recognized Emma, remembered her, and was genuinely thrilled to see her alive and well. "Rex, easy," Jake commanded gently, but he was smiling as he led the dog closer to Emma's bed. "Can Rex say hello to you, Emma?" "Yes, yes, please." Emma's hands were already reaching out, her fingers wiggling in anticipation. Jake gave Rex the release command, and the German Shepherd immediately placed his front paws on the edge of Emma's bed, a move he'd never been trained to do, something instinctual and beyond his police training. Emma wrapped her small arms around Rex's thick neck, burying her face in his fur exactly as she'd done in the parking lot when she'd first regained consciousness. But this time, she wasn't fighting for her life. This time, she was healthy and safe and whole. This time, when she pulled back to look at Rex, her eyes were clear and bright and filled with pure love. "I missed you so much," Emma whispered to the dog, her small hand stroking Rex's head, his ears, his neck. "Did you miss me too?" Rex answered by licking Emma's face enthusiastically, making her dissolve into giggles, the most beautiful sound Jake had ever heard. Sarah was crying again, but these were happy tears, healing tears. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures, capturing this moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. Jake watched the scene unfold with a tight throat and burning eyes. In his 8 years as a police officer, he'd been shot at, had chased dangerous criminals, had seen the worst of humanity. He'd learned to build walls around his emotions, to maintain professional distance, to not get personally invested in the people he helped. But watching Emma Mitchell, alive and laughing and hugging his K-9 partner, Jake realized that some walls were meant to be broken down. Some cases were meant to touch your heart. Some little girls in pink dresses were meant to remind you why you put on the badge in the first place. "Rex saved me, didn't he?" Emma asked, looking up at Jake with those innocent blue eyes. "When I was so hot and scared, he stayed with me and made me feel better." Jake knelt beside the bed, his hand resting on Rex's back. "Rex and I saved you together, Emma. We're a team, but you saved yourself too by being so brave and strong." Emma considered this seriously, then said with the perfect logic of a 5-year-old, "Then we're all heroes together. You and Rex and me." "Yeah," Jake agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "We're all heroes together." In that moment, in that hospital room filled with afternoon sunlight and the sound of a little girl's laughter and a dog's happy panting, Jake made a silent promise. He would stay in touch with this family. He would make sure Emma knew she could always count on him and Rex. Because some connections transcend duty and procedure and professional boundaries. Some connections are simply meant to be. Emma looked at Jake with sudden seriousness, her small hand still resting on Rex's head. "Officer Jake, can I tell you something important?" "Of course, Emma, what is it?" Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, as if she were sharing the world's biggest secret. "I want to be a police officer with a police dog when I grow up, just like you and Rex, so I can save people too." Sarah gasped softly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Jake felt something crack wide open in his chest, something that felt like hope, like redemption, like purpose renewed. "Then you'll be the best police officer ever," Jake told her, meaning every word. "And I'll be first in line to shake your hand when you graduate from the academy." Emma beamed at him, then turned her attention back to Rex, whispering secrets into his fur that only dogs can hear. And in that moment, Jake knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Emma's discharge from the hospital, and life had seemingly returned to normal for Officer Jake. He and Rex were back to their regular patrol routines, traffic stops, community events, the occasional domestic disturbance call. But something fundamental had shifted in Jake. Where he once saw just another day of duty, he now noticed the families in crosswalks, the children playing in parks, the precious fragility of every single life he was sworn to protect. Emma Mitchell had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. It was a Thursday afternoon when Jake's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He was in the middle of paperwork at the station, Rex dozing contentedly in his kennel nearby. Jake almost let it go to voicemail. Unknown numbers usually meant spam or wrong numbers, but something made him answer. "Officer speaking." "Jake, officer, it's Sarah Mitchell, Emma's mom." Her voice bubbled with excitement, completely different from the panicked, tearful woman he'd first met in that parking lot. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Jake smiled, setting down his pen. "Not at all, Mrs. Mitchell. How's Emma doing?" "She's wonderful, completely back to her normal, crazy, energetic self. Actually, that's why I'm calling." Sarah paused, and Jake could hear muffled voices in the background, Emma's high-pitched chatter unmistakable among them. "Emma's 6th birthday is this Saturday, and she has been absolutely insistent, and absolutely refusing to budge, that we invite you and Rex to her party. She says it won't be a real birthday without her heroes there." Jake was stunned into silence. A birthday party. He'd never been invited to a birthday party of someone he'd helped in the line of duty. It crossed every boundary of professional distance he'd been taught to maintain. But as he opened his mouth to politely decline, he heard Emma's voice shouting in the background. "Is that Officer Jake? Let me talk to him, please, Mommy, please." Sarah laughed. "Hold on, she's demanding the phone." There was a rustling sound, and then Emma's voice came through, breathless and excited. "Officer Jake, you have to come to my birthday party. I'm going to be 6 years old, and we're having a princess and police theme because I want to be a princess and a police officer. And there's going to be cake and games, and I told all my friends about you and Rex, and they don't believe me that I know a real police dog, so you have to come and prove it." The entire speech came out in one long, breathless rush, and Jake found himself grinning despite himself. How could anyone say no to that level of enthusiasm? "Emma, that sounds like an amazing party. So you'll come, you promise. And Rex too, please, please, please." Emma's voice took on a pleading quality that would have melted the hardest heart. Jake thought about all the reasons he should say no. He thought about professional boundaries, about not getting too personally involved, about the walls he'd built to protect himself from caring too much. Then he thought about Emma's face in that hospital room, her arms around Rex's neck, her declaration that they were all heroes together. "We'll be there," Jake heard himself say. "Rex and I wouldn't miss it for the world." Emma's squeal of delight was so loud Jake had to pull the phone away from his ear. "Did you hear that, Mommy?" He said, "Yes. Rex is coming to my party. This is the best birthday ever, and it hasn't even happened yet." Sarah came back on the line, her voice warm with gratitude. "Thank you, Jake. You have no idea how much this means to her. She's been through so much, and having you there. It'll be healing for her, for all of us, really." She gave him the details. Saturday at 2 p.m., their home in a neighborhood about 20 minutes from the station, casual dress, and no gifts necessary. "Your presence is the only gift Emma wants," Sarah said softly. "Well, your presence and Rex's." After hanging up, Jake sat at his desk for a long moment, staring at the address he'd written down. He was going to a 6-year-old's birthday party with his police dog. In 2 days. What had he gotten himself into? Did I just hear you agree to go to a kid's birthday party? His partner, Officer David, called from across the room, a teasing grin on his face. The Jake who once said he'd never get emotionally involved with civilians. Jake threw a wadded-up paper at him. Shut up. But David's expression softened. Hey man, I'm just giving you a hard time. What you did for that girl, that was something special. You deserve to see her happy and healthy. We all need reminders of why we do this job. Saturday arrived faster than Jake expected. He'd spent an embarrassing amount of time that morning making sure Rex was perfectly groomed, brushing his coat until it gleamed, cleaning his teeth, even trimming the fur around his paws. Rex seemed to sense something special was happening, his tail wagging non-stop as Jake loaded him into the patrol car. We're going to see Emma, Jake told his partner. Remember Emma, the little girl from the parking lot. At the mention of Emma's name, Rex's ears perked up dramatically, and he let out an excited bark. Jake was constantly amazed by how much his K-9 partner understood. Rex definitely remembered Emma. There was no doubt about that. The Mitchell home was a cheerful 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, with balloons tied to the mailbox, and a banner stretched across the front porch that read, Happy 6th Birthday, Princess Emma. Cars lined the street. Clearly the party was already in full swing. Jake could hear children's laughter and music coming from the backyard as he walked up the driveway with Rex at his side. Before he could even knock, the front door burst open and Emma launched herself at him like a tiny, pink-dressed rocket. You came. You really came. And you brought Rex. She dropped to her knees to hug the German shepherd, who responded with enthusiastic tail wags and gentle face licks that made Emma dissolve into giggles. Sarah appeared in the doorway, smiling broadly. Come on back to the yard. Emma has been watching the window for the past hour waiting for you. She leaned in conspiratorially. Fair warning, there are about 15 very excited 6-year-olds back there who are about to lose their minds over a real police dog. Jake laughed. Rex can handle it. He's been trained for crowd control. The backyard was a colorful chaos of streamers, balloons, and children running in every direction. There was a bounce house shaped like a castle, a table laden with pizza and snacks, and a cake decorated with both princesses and police badges. Emma's dual dreams perfectly represented in frosting. But the moment Jake and Rex stepped into the yard, everything stopped. 15 children froze mid-run, mid-jump, mid-bite, their eyes going wide as they spotted the massive German shepherd in the official K-9 vest. For one heartbeat, there was complete silence. Then all 15 children screamed in unison, a sound of pure, undiluted excitement, and surged forward like a wave. Is that a real police dog? Can I pet him? What's his name? Does he bite bad guys? Is he nice? The questions came rapid fire from all directions, and Jake found himself completely surrounded by tiny humans, all trying to get closer to Rex. Okay, Jake called out, laughing despite himself. Everyone take a step back and sit down and I'll tell you all about Rex, but you have to follow the rules, okay? The children immediately dropping to the grass in a semicircle, their faces upturned with rapt attention. Emma positioned herself right in front, beaming with pride. This is Officer Jake and his partner Rex, she announced to her friends with the authority of someone who'd been through something profound. They saved my life. They're heroes. Jake felt his throat tighten at Emma's simple, sincere words. He knelt down to the children's level, Rex sitting perfectly at his side. Rex is a working police dog, which means he has a very important job. He helps me catch bad guys, find missing people, and keep everyone safe. But right now, his job is to help Emma celebrate her birthday. Who wants to learn about what police dogs can do? A chorus of "Me" rang out, and for the next 20 minutes Jake found himself giving an impromptu K9 demonstration for an audience of enchanted 6-year-olds. He showed them Rex's commands, sit, stay, down, heel, and explained how police dogs are trained. The children were mesmerized, hanging on every word, their eyes wide with wonder. But Emma remained the star of her own party, proudly telling her friends the story of how Officer Jake and Rex had saved her. "I was so hot I couldn't wake up," she explained with dramatic flair. "But then Rex licked my hand and I opened my eyes and saw him and I knew I was safe." After the demonstration, Sarah called everyone for cake and ice cream. As the children sang "Happy Birthday" and Emma blew out her candles, Jake found himself standing slightly apart, watching the scene with a strange mix of emotions. This little girl, this survivor, was laughing and playing and living her life with no fear, no trauma, just pure joy. And he'd helped make that possible. Sarah appeared beside him holding 2 slices of cake. "You look like you could use some cake," she said, handing him a plate. "And also I wanted to say something." She paused, watching Emma surrounded by her friends. "You gave me my daughter back, Jake. You gave her a future. Watching her today, so happy and carefree, that's because of you. I'll never be able to repay that debt, but I want you to know that you'll always be part of this family. You and Rex both." Jake didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. Finally, he managed. "She's a special kid, Sarah. The world needs more people like Emma." "People like you mean," Sarah corrected gently. "The world needs more people like you." As the party continued around them, Emma ran up and tugged on Jake's hand. "Officer Jake, I have something for you." She pulled him over to a table where a small wrapped box sat waiting. "Open it." Inside was a hand-drawn picture in a child's frame. It showed a stick figure of a man in blue, a large black and tan dog, and a small girl with yellow hair, all holding hands under a sun. Across the top, in careful kindergarten lettering, Emma had written, "My heroes, thank you for saving me. Love, Emma." Jake stared at the drawing, at the simple but powerful message, and felt something shift irrevocably in his heart. This was why he'd become a cop. This was why every difficult day, every dangerous call, every sacrifice was worth it. Because somewhere out there was a 6-year-old girl who got to celebrate her birthday, who got to grow up, who got to dream of being a princess and a police officer, all because he and Rex had been in the right place at the right time. "Thank you, Emma," Jake said quietly, kneeling down to hug her. "This is the best gift anyone's ever given me." Emma hugged him back fiercely, then whispered in his ear, "You're the best police officer in the whole world. Don't forget that, okay?" As Jake drove home that evening, Rex dozing contentedly in the back seat, Emma's picture sitting carefully on the passenger seat, he realized something profound. He'd thought he was the one doing the saving, but maybe Emma had saved him too. Saved him from burnout, from cynicism, from forgetting why he'd chosen this path in the first place. Sometimes heroes come in unexpected packages. Sometimes they're 5 feet tall, wear princess dresses, and remind you that every life matters, every action counts, and every day is a chance to make a difference in someone's world. 3 months had passed since Emma's birthday party, and the story of her rescue had quietly become legend within the Phoenix Police Department. Jake found himself frequently asked to speak at community events about K9 units, and each time he told Emma's story, he saw the same reaction: parents holding their children a little closer, eyes glistening with tears, a renewed appreciation for the split-second decisions that could mean the difference between tragedy and miracle. But today was different. Today was special. The Phoenix Police Department was hosting their annual Heroes in Blue community outreach event at Veterans Memorial Park, a massive gathering designed to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community they served. There would be police vehicle displays, demonstrations from the SWAT team, a helicopter landing, and of course, the K9 unit showcase that Jake and Rex would be leading. They'd been preparing for weeks, perfecting their routine to show the public what well-trained police dogs could accomplish. What Jake didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell had been in contact with his captain for the past month, planning something that would change everything. The park was already packed by the time Jake arrived at noon. Families sprawled on blankets, children lined up for face painting, and the smell of food trucks filled the air. Jake's stomach churned with unusual nervousness. He'd done dozens of these demonstrations before, but something about today felt different. Rex seemed to sense it too, his ears constantly swiveling, his nose working overtime as they walked through the crowd toward the demonstration area. "Over here," Captain waved from the K9 demonstration stage, a raised platform with a PA system where officers would showcase their dogs' abilities. "We need to brief you on something before we start." Jake jogged over, Rex keeping perfect pace. The captain's expression was warm but unreadable. "What's going on, Cap?" "We have a special addition to today's program," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Someone specifically requested to be part of your demonstration. I think you'll approve." Before Jake could ask what she meant, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. "Officer Jake, Rex." Jake turned to see Emma Mitchell running toward him through the crowd, her curls bouncing, wearing a custom-made outfit that took his breath away. A pink dress with a police badge pinned to it, and a plastic police hat perched on her head. Behind her, Sarah walked more slowly, pushing a stroller with what appeared to be a baby, and beside her was a man Jake hadn't met before, presumably Emma's father. Emma crashed into Jake's legs with her characteristic enthusiasm, then immediately dropped down to hug Rex, who responded with happy tail wags and gentle licks. "I can't believe you're here," Jake said, genuinely surprised. "Does your mom know about this?" Sarah laughed as she caught up. "It was my idea, actually. Jake, this is my husband, Michael. He's been away on deployment with the Army for the past year, but he came home last month." Michael Mitchell stepped forward, a tall man with close-cropped hair and military bearing, extending his hand with tears already visible in his eyes. "Officer," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, "I was overseas when the incident happened. I had to hear over a phone call that my daughter almost died, that I wasn't there to protect her, but you were there. You saved her when I couldn't." His grip on Jake's hand tightened. "I can never thank you enough for giving me the chance to come home to my little girl." Jake felt his own throat tighten. "I was just doing my job, sir. I'm glad you're home safe." "Don't sir me. I'm the one who should be calling you sir," Michael said firmly. Then his expression shifted to something more curious. "Now my wife and Captain have been conspiring about something, and I have a feeling you're about to find out what." Captain stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "Ladies and, if I could have your attention please." The crowd noise gradually died down as people turned toward the stage. "In a few minutes, we'll begin our K9 unit demonstration with Officer Jake and his partner Rex. But before we do, I want to tell you a story." Jake felt a flutter of nervousness. What was happening? 3 months ago, Officer and Rex responded to an emergency call at Desert Ridge Mall. A 5-year-old girl named Emma Mitchell had been accidentally locked in a hot car. Officer made a split-second decision that saved that little girl's life. Today, Emma is here, healthy and happy, and she has something very special planned. The captain gestured toward Emma, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Sarah knelt down and whispered something to her daughter, who nodded eagerly. Then, to Jake's complete shock, Emma climbed the stairs to the stage with her mother, and Captain handed her the microphone, lowering it to Emma's level. The crowd of several hundred people fell completely silent, all eyes on this tiny girl in her Princess Police outfit. Emma looked out at the sea of faces, suddenly shy, and glanced back at her mother for reassurance. Sarah nodded encouragingly. Emma took a deep breath, gathering her courage, and spoke into the microphone. "Hi, my name is Emma Mitchell, and I'm 6 years old." Her small voice echoed across the park. 3 months ago, I made a really big mistake. My mommy told me to wait outside the car, but I climbed back in to get my stuffed bunny, and I accidentally locked myself inside. It was so hot, I got really, really sick." The crowd was utterly transfixed. Parents unconsciously pulled their children closer. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. "I thought I was going to die. I was so scared and so hot and I couldn't breathe good. But then I heard glass breaking and someone pulled me out, and when I opened my eyes, I saw a big police dog looking at me. His name is Rex." Emma pointed to where Rex sat beside the stage, and several people in the crowd gasped. They hadn't realized the hero dog was right there. "Officer Jake and Rex saved my life," Emma continued, and now tears were streaming down her face, though her voice remained steady. "The doctors said if they had waited even 2 more minutes, I would have died or my brain would have been really hurt. But they didn't wait. They broke the window and got me out and stayed with me until the ambulance came." Sarah had her hand over her mouth, crying silently. Michael stood ramrod straight, military discipline, barely keeping his own emotions in check. Jake felt like his heart might burst out of his chest. "I learned something really important that day," Emma said, her 6-year-old wisdom carrying across the silent park. "Police officers and their dogs aren't scary. They're heroes. They save people like me. And I want everyone here to know that Officer Jake and Rex are the bravest, kindest heroes in the whole world." The crowd erupted in applause, but Emma held up her small hand, indicating she wasn't finished. The noise died down again. "Today, I want to do something special. I want to give Officer Jake and Rex an award for saving my life." Emma turned to Captain, who handed her a small plaque. "My daddy is a soldier, and soldiers get medals for being brave. I think police officers should get medals too." Emma walked across the stage to where Jake stood frozen in shock. She held up the plaque which read, "To Officer Jake and K9 Rex for extraordinary courage and heroism. You are my heroes. Love, Emma Mitchell." "This is for you," Emma said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for letting me have more birthdays and go to school and grow up and maybe be a police officer like you someday." Jake knelt down, taking the plaque with shaking hands, and Emma threw her arms around his neck. The crowd's applause was deafening now, but Jake barely heard it over the sound of his own heart pounding and the lump in his throat that made breathing difficult. "Thank you, Emma," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you for being so brave. Thank you for reminding me why I do this job." Emma pulled back and looked at him with those serious blue eyes. "Can I say something to Rex too?" "Of course." Emma climbed down from the stage and knelt in front of the German Shepherd, who had been watching the entire scene with unusual intensity. She wrapped her arms around Rex's neck, pressed her face against his fur, and whispered something that only the dog could hear. But Jake saw Rex's reaction. The dog's eyes closed, his head leaned into Emma's embrace, and his tail wagged slowly, gently, as if he understood every word. When Emma finally pulled back, she looked up at Jake with a smile that could have powered the entire city. "I told him he's the best dog in the universe, and I love him forever." "He loves you too, Emma," Jake said, and he meant it. He'd seen Rex with dozens of people, had watched his partner remain professionally detached in countless situations, but with Emma, it was different. The bond between them transcended training and duty. It was something pure and real and unbreakable. Captain took the microphone again, her own voice thick with emotion. "Ladies, and this is what community policing is all about. This is why we do what we do. Let's give Officer Rex and especially Emma Mitchell a round of applause." The ovation was thunderous. People were standing, clapping, cheering, many of them crying openly. Jake looked out at the crowd and saw what Emma's story had done. It had reminded everyone that behind the badge and the uniform and the police dog were human beings dedicated to protecting and serving, willing to put themselves on the line for strangers. The demonstration that followed was the best Jake and Rex had ever performed. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was performing for Emma, who sat in the front row with her family, watching with stars in her eyes. Rex executed every command flawlessly, and when Jake explained each skill, tracking, apprehension, article search. He related it back to how those skills had helped him assess and respond to Emma's emergency. After the demonstration, dozens of people lined up to meet Rex and take photos. But Emma never left. She stayed right by Jake's side, proudly explaining to anyone who would listen that this was her police officer and her police dog, the ones who had saved her life. As the afternoon wore on and the event began winding down, Sarah approached Jake with an envelope. "This is from Emma. She wanted to write you a letter, and I helped her with the spelling, but the words are all hers." Jake opened the envelope and pulled out a piece of paper covered in careful kindergarten handwriting and drawings of stick figures. A man, a dog, and a little girl, all holding hands. "Dear Officer Jake and Rex," the letter read, "thank you for saving my life. Before that scary day, I thought police were just people who gave tickets and arrested bad guys. But now I know that police are people who protect kids like me and keep us safe. You are my hero. When I grow up, I want to be brave like you. I want to help people like you helped me. I love you and Rex so much. Your friend forever, Emma." Jake folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his uniform pocket, right over his heart. He looked at Emma, who was now giggling as Rex gave her gentle kisses, and he realized something profound. He joined the police force 8 years ago wanting to make a difference, wanting to matter, wanting to be someone's hero. But he'd gotten lost along the way, buried under paperwork and routine and the daily grind of the job. He'd forgotten the why behind the badge. Emma had given that back to him. This 6-year-old girl with curls and boundless courage had reminded him that every call matters, every action counts, every life saved is a miracle worth fighting for. "Emma," Jake called softly. She looked up from where she was playing with Rex. "I have something to tell you too." "What is it, Officer Jake?" "You're my hero too. You remind me every day why I put on this uniform. Thank you for that." Emma's smile could have lit up the entire world. 6 months had passed since the community event, and Jake's life had transformed in ways he never could have anticipated. Emma Mitchell had become a permanent fixture in his world, not just a memory of a rescue, but a real, ongoing presence. The Mitchell family invited Jake and Rex to dinner once a month. Emma sent him drawings regularly, and Jake found himself checking in on her progress like a proud uncle watching his niece grow up. But today was going to be different. Today was going to be the day that would cement this bond forever in a way none of them could have predicted. It was early December, and Phoenix had finally shaken off the oppressive heat of summer. The morning air was crisp and cool as Jake and Rex responded to what seemed like a routine call, a community relations event at Emma's elementary school, Sunset Ridge Elementary. The school had requested a K-9 demonstration for their Community Helpers Week, and when Jake learned it was Emma's school, he'd volunteered immediately. Emma had been beside herself with excitement for weeks. "Officer Jake and Rex are coming to MY school," she told him over the phone, her voice practically vibrating with pride. "Everyone is going to be so jealous that I actually know you." Jake smiled at the memory as he pulled into the school parking lot. Rex was already alert in the back seat, sensing they were somewhere new and interesting. The school's principal, Mrs. Helen, met them at the entrance with a warm smile. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Officer, thank you so much for coming. The children are so excited, especially Emma Mitchell. That girl hasn't stopped talking about you and Rex for days." Mrs. led them through the hallways decorated with children's artwork and colorful educational posters. "We've assembled all the first and second graders in the multi-purpose room. That's about 150 kids if you're comfortable with that size audience." "Rex and I can handle it," Jake assured her, though his heart rate picked up slightly. 150 kids was a lot of energy in one room. The multi-purpose room was already packed with small bodies sitting cross-legged on the floor, teachers stationed around the perimeter trying to maintain order. The moment Jake and Rex entered, a wave of excited whispers rippled through the crowd. Jake spotted Emma immediately. She was in the front row, wearing a shirt with a police badge drawn on it in marker, bouncing with barely contained excitement. But what happened next took everyone by surprise. Before Mrs. could even introduce Jake, Emma stood up. Then, without any prompting or permission, she walked straight toward Jake and Rex with a determination that silenced the entire room. Teachers started to intervene, thinking she was breaking protocol, but Jake held up his hand, signaling it was okay. Emma stopped directly in front of Rex, who sat at perfect attention beside Jake. The German Shepherd's eyes locked onto the little girl, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, affection, something that transcended his training. The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Every single child, every teacher, every adult present seemed to hold their breath, sensing they were about to witness something profound. Emma's eyes filled with tears, not sad tears, but the kind of tears that come from overwhelming emotion that a 6-year-old body can barely contain. She looked at Rex, then at Jake, then back at Rex. Her small hands were trembling at her sides. And then, in a voice that shook with the weight of everything she'd been through, everything she'd survived, everything these two heroes meant to her, Emma spoke 2 words. Thank you. Those 2 simple words, words that humans say dozens of times every day without thinking, words that can be thrown away casually in response to someone passing the salt, hung in the air with devastating power. Because when Emma said them, they carried the weight of a life saved, a future granted, a child who got to grow up because 2 beings had refused to let her slip away. Jake felt like he'd been punched in the chest. His vision blurred immediately as tears he couldn't control filled his eyes. In 8 years of police work, through shootings and car accidents and domestic violence calls and every horror the job could throw at him, Jake had never cried on duty. He'd prided himself on his professional composure, his ability to compartmentalize, his emotional walls. But 2 words from a 6-year-old girl shattered every single one of those walls. Rex responded to Emma's words in a way Jake had never seen. The German Shepherd, trained to be fierce, disciplined, controlled, lowered his head and pressed it gently against Emma's chest, as if giving her a hug, as if understanding the profound gratitude in those simple words. Emma wrapped her arms around Rex's neck and buried her face in his fur, her small shoulders shaking as she cried. Jake couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Tears streamed down his face openly now, and he didn't care who saw. Every person in that room, 150 children, a dozen teachers, the principal, was crying too. Not a sound broke the silence except Emma's soft sobs and the collective sniffles of 150-plus people trying to process the raw emotion of this moment. Finally, Jake knelt down beside Emma and Rex, his hand resting on Emma's back. "You're welcome, sweetheart," he managed to whisper, his voice completely wrecked. "You're so welcome." Emma pulled back from Rex just enough to look at Jake, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red but shining with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so young. "You saved my life," she said, each word deliberate and weighted. "You gave me everything. My birthdays, my Christmases, my school, my friends, my family. Everything I have is because you didn't give up on me. How do I ever thank you enough for that?" Jake pulled Emma into his arms, holding her tight while Rex pressed against both of them, completing their circle. "You just did," Jake whispered into her hair. "You just did." The room remained silent for several long moments, everyone present understanding they were witnessing something sacred, a moment of pure human connection, of gratitude so profound it transcended words, of a bond forged in crisis and sealed in love. Mrs. finally approached, tears streaming down her own face, and gently touched Emma's shoulder. "Emma, sweetheart, do you want to tell your classmates what Officer and Rex did for you?" Emma nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She turned to face the assembled students, still standing between Jake and Rex, drawing strength from their presence. "6 months ago, I almost died," she began, her voice small but clear. "I got locked in a hot car by accident and I got so sick I stopped breathing good. But Officer Jake broke the window and pulled me out, and Rex stayed with me and made me feel safe, and they saved my life." The children stared at her with wide eyes, some of them reaching up to hold hands with the friend sitting next to them, the gravity of Emma's words landing hard even on their young hearts. "Before that day, I thought police were just people who arrest bad guys," Emma continued. "But now I know that police are people who save kids like me. They protect us. They keep us safe. They're heroes." She turned to look up at Jake with such fierce love and loyalty that it nearly broke him all over again. "Officer Jake and Rex are my heroes, and they'll always be my heroes forever and ever." The room erupted in applause, but it wasn't the enthusiastic, chaotic clapping of children. It was something deeper, more reverent. The teachers were crying openly now. Several children had tears on their cheeks, and Jake stood there in the middle of it all, one hand on Emma's shoulder, one hand on Rex's head, feeling like his heart might actually explode from the overwhelming mixture of pride, love, and purpose flooding through him. The K-9 demonstration that followed was probably the worst Jake had ever given, technically speaking. He kept having to pause to collect himself. His voice cracked multiple times. He had to wipe his eyes repeatedly. But it was also the most impactful demonstration he'd ever given, because it wasn't about perfect execution or impressive skills. It was about the why behind everything. It was about showing 150 children that the badge meant something, that heroes were real, that sometimes ordinary people in uniform did extraordinary things. After the demonstration, during the question and answer session, a small boy in the back raised his hand. "Officer, were you scared when you had to break the window to save Emma?" Jake considered the question carefully. "You know what? I was terrified, not of breaking the window, that part was easy, but I was scared that I might be too late, that I might not be able to save her. Fear doesn't mean you're not brave. Being brave means you're scared, but you do the right thing anyway." A little girl with pigtails asked, "Does Rex understand that he saved Emma's life?" Jake looked down at his partner, who was resting his head on Emma's lap as she sat beside him on the floor. "I think he does. Dogs are smarter than we give them credit for. Rex knows Emma is special. He's never acted with anyone else the way he acts with her." Emma raised her hand, even though she didn't really need permission to speak. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course, Emma." "Will you always be my friend? You and Rex?" Her voice was small, uncertain, vulnerable in a way that pierced straight through Jake's heart. Jake knelt down to Emma's eye level, aware that 150 children and a dozen adults were watching this exchange. "Emma Mitchell, you are stuck with Rex and me for life. We'll be at every birthday party you'll let us come to. We'll be there when you graduate elementary school, middle school, high school. We'll be there when you grow up and become a police officer yourself, if that's what you choose. We're not just your heroes, you're our hero too. You remind us every day why we do this job. So yes, sweetheart, always." Emma launched herself at Jake, hugging him with the fierce, wholehearted embrace that only children can give. "I love you, Officer Jake. I love you, Rex. Thank you for being my heroes. Thank you for giving me my life back." And there it was again, that simple word thank you, carrying the weight of the world. As Jake drove away from Sunset Ridge Elementary an hour later, Rex dozing in the back seat, he found himself thinking about those two words. Thank you. Such simple words. Words people said without thinking dozens of times a day. But when Emma said them, they meant everything. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for breaking the rules and breaking the window and breaking through your own professional distance to treat me like I mattered. Thank you for giving me birthdays and Christmases and friendships and dreams. Thank you for giving me a future. Thank you for giving me life. Jake pulled over into a parking lot and sat there for a moment, letting the full impact of the morning wash over him. He pulled out his phone and called his captain. "Cap, I just wanted to say thank you." "For what, Jake?" "For assigning me to that community event at Emma's school, for pushing me to do more community outreach, for not letting me hide behind my badge and stay emotionally disconnected. Jake's voice was thick. That little girl changed my life today. 2 words. She just said thank you, and it reminded me why I became a cop in the first place. There was a pause, and then Captain's voice came back soft and warm. That's what I like to hear. That's the kind of officer I want on my force. One who remembers that behind every call, every case, every incident, there are real people whose lives we impact. Emma Mitchell is lucky to have you, but I think you're lucky to have her too. I am, Cap, I really am. As Jake ended the call and pulled back onto the road, heading toward his next assignment, he found himself smiling despite the tears still drying on his face. 8 years ago, he joined the police force wanting to be someone's hero. Today, a 6-year-old girl had said 2 words that made him realize he'd succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. And in the process, she'd become his hero too. Sometimes the smallest voices deliver the most powerful messages. Sometimes 2 words can change everything. And sometimes, the people we save end up saving us right back, 5 years later. Officer Jake stood in the parking lot of Desert Ridge Mall on a sweltering July afternoon, the heat shimmering off the asphalt in familiar waves. Beside him sat Rex, older now, graying around the muzzle, moving a bit slower but still alert and devoted. They'd returned to this spot many times over the years, sometimes for routine patrols, sometimes just to remember. But today was different. Today was special. Today marked exactly 5 years since the day that changed everything. Jake's radio crackled. Unit 47, you have visitors at your location. He smiled, already knowing who it was. A familiar silver pulled into the parking lot, Sarah Mitchell's car, though it had been replaced twice since that fateful day. The doors opened, and out stepped the Mitchell family, but they looked so different now. Michael was in civilian clothes, having completed his military service and taken a job as a high school history teacher. Sarah carried a toddler, Emma's little brother, born 2 years ago and named Jacob Rex Mitchell, after the 2 heroes who'd saved his sister's life. And then there was Emma. She wasn't a tiny 6-year-old anymore. Emma Mitchell was now 11 years old, tall for her age, her curls cut shorter in a practical style. But her eyes, those same blue eyes that had looked up at Jake from a hospital bed, still held that same fierce determination and boundless courage. She wore a t-shirt that read Future K-9 Officer and carried a poster board under her arm. "Officer Jake," Emma called, running toward him with the enthusiasm she'd never. She was too old now to crash into his legs like she used to, but she still gave him a tight hug before dropping to her knees to embrace Rex. "Hey, old buddy," she whispered to the dog. "I missed you." Rex's tail wagged slowly, and he licked Emma's face with the same gentle affection he'd shown her for 5 years. The bond between them had never weakened. If anything, it had grown stronger. Emma visited Jake and Rex at least twice a month, had volunteered at the K-9 training center since she turned 10, and had never wavered from her dream of becoming a police officer with her own K-9 partner. "What's with the poster board?" Jake asked as Sarah and Michael approached with little Jacob. Emma's face lit up. "It's for my school presentation. I'm doing a project on people who changed my life, and obviously I'm doing it about you and Rex. Can I interview you? I have questions." For the next 20 minutes in that same parking lot where Emma had nearly died, she interviewed Jake about that day, asking detailed questions about his decision-making process, his training, what went through his mind. She took careful notes, asked follow-up questions, and showed a maturity and intelligence that amazed Jake. This wasn't a little kid anymore. This was a young woman with purpose, with direction, with dreams that had been forged in fire and saved by quick action. "Last question," Emma said, her pen poised over her notebook. "If you could go back to that day 5 years ago, knowing everything you know now about how our lives would become connected, would you change anything?" Jake considered the question carefully. Not a single thing. Well, maybe I'd have gotten to you 30 seconds faster, but Emma, that day didn't just save your life, it saved mine too. I was burned out, questioning why I'd become a cop, wondering if I was making any difference at all. You reminded me. You gave me purpose back. So no, I wouldn't change anything. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, staying professional for her interview. Thank you, that's perfect. She closed her notebook and looked up at him. You know what's crazy? In 5 more years, I'll be 16. I can start the Police Explorer program. And in 10 years, I'll be 21, old enough to actually join the force. It's really going to happen, Officer Jake. I'm really going to do this. I know you are, Jake said softly. And you're going to be the best K-9 officer the Phoenix Police Department has ever seen. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes also glistening with emotion. Jake, we wanted to do something special to mark this anniversary. We've been working with the Phoenix Police Department and the City Council for the past year on a project. She handed him an official-looking envelope. Open it. Inside was a formal invitation to a dedication ceremony scheduled for next month. Jake read the details, his hands beginning to shake. The city was installing a permanent memorial in this very parking lot, a bronze statue of a police officer and a K-9 dog, with a plaque explaining the importance of quick action in hot car emergencies. The statue would be accompanied by educational signage about child safety and emergency response, and it would be called the Emma Mitchell Memorial Education Site. It's not really named after me, Emma explained quickly. It's named after what happened to me, so other kids don't have to go through it. We've been working with hospitals and police departments to create education programs. We've already presented to over 50 schools about car safety. Last year alone, 3 kids were saved because parents remembered the warnings from our program. Jake stared at the invitation, unable to speak. 3 kids saved. 3 families that didn't have to experience the terror Sarah had felt. 3 lives that continued because Emma had turned her trauma into purpose. You're not just going to be a great police officer, Jake finally managed. You already are one. You're already saving lives, Emma. Michael spoke up, his military bearing evident even in casual clothes. Jake, when I came home from deployment 5 years ago, I struggled with the fact that I hadn't been there to protect my daughter. But then I realized something. The universe put the right person in the right place at the right time. You were meant to save Emma, and Emma was meant to save you right back. That's not coincidence. That's purpose. Little Jacob, who had been quietly observing everything, suddenly reached out toward Rex. The toddler had grown up hearing stories about the hero doggy, had seen pictures and videos, but this was only his 3rd time meeting Rex in person. Rex, patient as ever, allowed the small child to pet his head, his tail wagging gently. Hero, Jacob said clearly, one of his few words. Rex Hero. Everyone laughed through their tears. Even at 2 years old, Jacob understood what Rex represented: safety, courage, protection, love. As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting golden light across the parking lot, the Mitchell family and Jake stood together in the spot where everything had changed. Emma pulled out her phone and asked a passing stranger to take a photo. Jake and Rex, Sarah and Michael, Emma and little Jacob, all together in front of the space where Emma had nearly died, but instead had been reborn. Say heroes, Emma instructed, and they all did, smiling for the camera, capturing a moment of pure joy and gratitude. After the stranger handed back the phone and walked away, Emma turned to Jake one more time. Officer Jake, I have something I've been wanting to say, but I've been waiting for today, the 5-year anniversary, to say it. What's that, Emma? She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. 5 years ago, you gave me a future. You gave me the chance to grow up, to learn, to dream, to become whoever I want to be. Every birthday, every Christmas, every first day of school, every accomplishment, all of it exists because you refused to give up on a little girl you didn't even know. I've said thank you 1,000 times, but I don't think I've ever really explained what those words mean. Emma's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Thank you means I get to see my little brother grow up. Thank you means I get to hug my parents every day. Thank you means I get to chase my dreams of becoming a K-9 officer. Thank you means I get to make a difference in the world because you made a difference in mine. Thank you means I'm alive, I'm here, I'm whole, and it's all because of you." Jake couldn't help it. Tears streamed down his face again, just like they had in Emma's school 5 years ago. Rex pressed against his leg, offering silent support. Sarah and Michael were crying too, holding each other and their children, grateful beyond words for this beautiful, complicated, perfect life they'd been given. "Emma," Jake said, his voice breaking, "you don't owe me thanks. You don't owe me anything. What you've done with the life you were given, turning your trauma into education, already saving lives, inspiring others, that's the greatest thanks anyone could ever give. You took a terrible moment and transformed it into hope. That's extraordinary." Emma smiled through her tears. "We're a team, remember? You, me, and Rex. We saved each other. And we're going to keep saving people together. You with your badge, me with my education programs, and someday with my own badge too." As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Jake looked at the young woman Emma had become and felt an overwhelming sense of pride and purpose. He'd been a police officer for 13 years now. He'd made hundreds of arrests, responded to thousands of calls, helped countless people. But this, Emma, was his legacy. Not just saving her life, but watching her transform that second chance into something meaningful, something powerful, something that would ripple out and touch hundreds or thousands of other lives. Rex nudged Jake's hand with his gray muzzle, and Jake scratched behind his partner's ears. "We did good, buddy," he whispered. "We did real good." They took more photos as the golden hour light bathed them in warmth. They laughed, they cried, they shared stories and memories. Little Jacob fell asleep on his father's shoulder. Sarah showed Jake the architect's renderings of the memorial statue. It looked remarkably like him and Rex, captured in bronze forever, a permanent reminder that heroes are real and miracles happen. As the Mitchell family prepared to leave, Emma gave Jake one final hug. "See you in 2 weeks, for dinner at our place." "Wouldn't miss it," Jake promised. Emma knelt down to Rex one last time, pressing her forehead against his. "Thank you for always being there for me," she whispered. "I love you forever." Rex licked her cheek, his tail wagging, and Jake knew without question that his partner understood every word. As Jake and Rex drove away from the parking lot that evening, the radio playing softly, the sun setting behind them, Jake thought about the incredible journey 5 years had brought. He'd started as a burned-out cop questioning his purpose. Now he was Emma Mitchell's hero, Jacob Mitchell's namesake, and a living reminder that every action matters, every decision counts, every life saved creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. He glanced in the mirror at Rex, who was watching the road with those wise, amber eyes that had seen so much. "You know what the best part is, Rex," Jake said aloud. "We get to watch Emma become a K-9 officer someday. We get to be there when she walks across that stage at the police academy, when she gets her own partner, when she saves her first life. We get to see the legacy continue." Rex's tail thumped once against the seat, and Jake smiled. 5 years ago, 2 words from a little girl had changed everything. Thank you. Today, those same 2 words still carried infinite weight, infinite meaning, infinite hope. And somewhere in the universe, Jake believed, destiny smiled, because a police officer and his K-9 partner had been in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to save a little girl who would grow up to save countless others. That was purpose, that was meaning, that was why he wore the badge. And he would never, ever forget it.